Welcome and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Rausch. I am your own personal sales maven. I'm here to offer you tips, strategies, and techniques to truly master your sales conversations. Today, we're going to talk about words and the words that actually work and how language and framing changes everything in your sales conversations. Now, this particular episode is applicable in a couple different areas, not just in sales conversations, but also in your outreach, also when you're doing research. Have you found yourself recently wanting to do some surveys or ask for feedback in some way? This episode will help you with how to frame those questions in a way that is going to get you a much better response. And of course, it's going to apply to your sales conversations as well. So, a lot of times there's a misconception that sales is really about what you're offering, but really it's about what you're asking and how you're asking it. And language will either open a door or it will close it before the conversation even starts. So, this particular episode comes from a one of the Ask Nikki Live sessions for the Sales Maven Society and a conversation that somebody brought into the coaching call this idea of doing some market research and framing the questions. And with just a little bit of time and just a little bit of framing, she found that, oh, okay, if you can change this wording here and phrase this a little bit differently, it's going to land differently to your audience. And that's really what prompted this episode. Now, you may have heard me talk about some of these techniques before. The language piece, I love language so much, and I'm I think I'm a student of language, and specifically from my background in neurolinguistic programming, this idea of how to frame things in a way that is going to build rapport. It's going to draw people in. It's going to elicit a response. Like all of that can happen just in you doing a better job of choosing how you phrase things. So, the first one that came up, and this one comes up a lot actually in outreach messages, definitely in sales conversations, and of course when people are doing their market research. They love to start a question with are you. Now, the problem with the are you as the question, like, are you currently outsourcing X, Y, and Z? Or are you currently looking for somebody to handle your social media management, whatever it is? But the are you is a yes or no question, right? And so when I talk about how language is going to open doors or close doors, when you ask questions that really elicit a yes or no response in these types of situations, you're kind of shutting down the conversation, and that is not helpful. Now, here is a simple switch. Instead of asking, are you currently outsourcing X, Y, and Z? Instead, you say, which of these are you currently outsourcing? And then you give a bulleted list known as a menu. I know I've talked about giving a menu before on the podcast, and I talk about it a lot in my coaching calls with clients. It is a incredibly impactful way to help people make decisions. So you frame the question instead of are you, it's which of these, and then you give them some options to choose from. So it really changes the way the brain is working when you pose a question like this. So instead of giving the easy exit in the yes or no, the which is going to move the conversation forward. All right. So the place where you could actually use this, definitely in your discovery calls, you can definitely use this on your intake forms. If you have intake forms that you're asking clients to fill out, your follow-up emails, and again, surveys and things like that. Anything or anywhere where you're asking clients to give you information about themselves, their situation, which of these are important to you instead of, is this important to you, right? You see the difference? Okay, here's the next one that I want to encourage you to think about phrasing. is the why question. We love to use why, and in sales conversations and in a lot of interactions, I do recommend getting why out of your vocabulary. The thing about why, this is a very NLP principle that we're talking about here, is why can be a trap. And the reason is it can often make people feel defensive. It can cause them to want to blame, and it also elicits often a lot of story. So, why is one of those phrases in sales conversations. And when I'm having a conversation with a client or a prospective client, that I recommend getting why out of the conversation. It is unnecessary. So instead of using why, like for instance, why did you stop X, Y, and Z? Or why are you looking for a coach to do blah, blah, blah for you, right? Common phrases. You've probably said them yourselves, like we all have. And this is a way for you to say it in a more effective way. So instead of why did you, or why are you, or why aren't you, instead ask the question like this: what shifted for you when you started doing X, Y, and Z? Or what shifted for you when you stopped doing X, Y, and Z? So what shifted doesn't necessarily bring up blame, shame, right? Defensiveness. And it could still bring some story in. So you want to think about that. Is that appropriate for the conversation? But the idea is, we often use the what, the how, the where, the when, but the why is the one you want to leave out. And so you just replace it with what, all right, or how, right? So instead of like, why is this such and such a way, you would say like, what's been most helpful for you, or how have things changed, or what would need to be different for this to be an easy yes for you, right? So all of these questions work really well versus like, well, why are you declining? Well, why did you blah, blah, blah? It just creates such a potential defensiveness for the other person. And it's just not helpful in the sales conversation. Okay, here is another one that I want to bring into the conversation around language. And I feel like I spend a good majority of my time on this one. If you're hearing this for the first time, prepare yourself because you're going to hear it again and again. And I have talked about it on the podcast before. I talk about it continuously with my coaching clients. I talk about it continuously with my Sales Maven Society members. And the reason for it is because they forget. It is such an easy one to fall back to using. This is a really common way that we phrase language. And in sales conversations, and in market research, and in your outreach messages, I just find that if you replace the word I'm going to share with you with the word I'm going to encourage you to use, there will be a different type of response. Now, this isn't an all or nothing. It doesn't mean that when I bring this one into the conversation, that it means you can never use this word again, right? Like, you get to choose, you're an adult. I'm just going to point this out so you can decide whether or not this is something that you want to bring into the way you are framing your questions and the way that you are framing your messaging. So here's the one. I swear this is the one that drives me the most crazy. It's the if statements. Marketers love if. Oh boy, do they love if. You see it often in your email copies, your sales pages, your outreach messages, your live conversations. We love to use if. But if is when you use something like, well, if you'd like some more information, do X, Y, and Z. Or if you would like to talk about this more, we should schedule a time. Or if you'd like to work together, blah, blah, blah. No, no more if. It's when. Or you just leave off with if completely. Like, it's not like, if you'd like more information, click this link. You just say, for more information, click this link. You don't need if. If is one of those things that I always say it like slows down the decision. It slows down the conversation. You're essentially saying to somebody when you write if statements and when you use if statements, like, are you sure? You better think about it. Don't decide too quickly to hire me. You better take some time and think about it. You just don't need if. So often I recommend when you're going to write if statements, go back and try plugging in when instead. So when X, Y, and Z is so much different than if. So if your budget loosens, would you be interested in having a conversation about ways we could work together? Or you could just say, when your budget loosens, let's set up a time to have a conversation. It just lands differently. Now, if you love if, again, you get to decide, you're an adult. These are ones I'm sharing with you. If is so overused. And again, I'm not saying you can never, ever use the word if, but I will encourage you that as you look at your sales pages, as you look at your outreach messages, as you look at the way that you're framing your research questions, your survey questions, instead of using if, ask yourself, do I even need that here? Or can I just say the statement? Or if it does need to be a question, could I put when in front of or in place of if, and does it still grammatically work? And does it get me a better response? I'm going to say most of the time the answer is yes. So get rid of those ifs. You just don't need them. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here. There's definitely more that I could go on with language. And as a matter of fact, in the coaching call from the question that kind of prompted this episode, there were a few more that I addressed. But for the sake of this episode, I wanted to give you things that I thought you could immediately implement into your conversations, or take a look at the messages that you've put out recently and ask yourself, like, with a little bit of a tweak, would this make this a better episode? Would this, or not episode, hopefully it's a good episode, but would it make it a better message? Would it make it a stronger message? Would it get me a better response from the person that I'm asking the question of? So the ones that we talked about today is, instead of saying, are you, asking the yes, no question, replace that with which questions, which or what or when questions, right? And see how that lands. The second one was getting rid of the why. You don't need the why, right? In the conversation. And then the third one was getting the if out of there and using when, and or just making it a statement instead of using if. All right. So which one are you going to use? Which of these 3 suggestions do you find could be helpful to you in your business? And would you reach out and share? I'm always delighted to hear from you. And you can reach me by sending an email. You can, send out the contact form on the website, or connect with me on social media. I tend to hang out on LinkedIn and Instagram. So you can find me either of those places. All right. As always, thank you so much for listening. I am wishing you just continued success in all that you're doing. Have a great rest of your day.